So I'm going to go through how to get the gotek working on the IBM 5150. The goal being I wanted to put a Rogue on there, but before that, I'll go over through some basic gotek things. If you're new to gotek, this hopefully will be a nice introduction. So there are many different types of goteks, and what doesn't really matter is what software they're running, because we'll be able to flash these to make them run with whatever floppy disk format we want. But what does matter is what features they support. So you can see some of these don't have displays, and if you don't have a display, you won't be able to tell which floppy drive you're on. And other than that, what you need to worry about is what kind of connector they have on the back. So this is the small one for like some sort of like laptop. There's also a gotek floppy that has a USB on the back, so that won't be able to connect to any of these older computers. And the last you got to worry about is some of these box formed goteks. They have a different motherboard inside, so you won't be able to program the same way you would one of these gotek devices with the IDE connection in the back and the programming header here with these jumpers that allow you to change the boot. So I'll run you through the board layout and what you'll see inside. So on the inside, we'll start with the display connection, which is connected to the front 8 segment displays that will show you what number you're currently on. And this is nice, but later on the line you can update with an OLED so you can see the words of the file. Next we have the STM32F1 ARM chip, and these are great. They're easy to program, and that's partly why we had this huge behind the scenes software movements, because this chip's very easy to program. Now down the line we have our jumper pins that configure a few things on the gotek. These two jumpers right here define the drive selection, this being 1 and this one being 0. Here is your programming header. Normally this is going to be unpopulated, so you have to put those in. This is your IDE connection, and over to the left is your mini Molex that you're going to plug in 5 volts to. To program it, you're going to first need some sort of 5-volt signal into the gotek. This is just an STM board. This could be an Arduino. This could be a USB outlet device, anything to get 5 volts into here. This is the programming tool I'm using to actually program the gotek. This is an STM Link V3, and this wire schematic is set up for serial wire, which is not the standard way of doing it, but I find serial wire to be better than UART. So this is what the UART, if you want to program it over UART, this is going to look like. You put this little jumper between boot 0 and 3.3, and when you do that, it's going to look something like this. You're going to turn it on. You're not going to see anything on the front, but that's okay, because that's how you know it's in boot 0. These are the wire setups for either or. So you can get the latest flash floppy at their GitHub. You can just, you're going to need the hex file, and we're going to use this in the programming software. The programming software of choice is the STM32Q programmer. They have other command line tools, but this one's cross-platform enough, so you can use it on your Mac, Windows, or Linux. Now, if you want to use the ST-Link to use serial wire, you can do that, but for this example, we're going to do UART. You're going to want a fast baud rate, else it's going to be semi-slow, but not too fast. So 115,000 is pretty good. Right here, you can see it's working because it's reading out the current program in the files. And here we go. We can program the hex and hit start programming, and you'll see a bar down here loading. And yeah. And once it's done, you get a little pop-up saying you're all good. And when you restart your device and turn it back on, you should see that it has a good old F-F. And that's exactly what you want to see, because that means there's no USB in and you've successfully flashed the gotek. So I'm going to show you my flash drive, and it's relatively simple. It's just, an 8 gigabyte flat FAT32 drive, and it's mostly empty, not too much happening. But this file format's pretty crucial. We have these disk images, and they have to be the specific name, and these names indicate what they'll be when you actually load them up onto the gotek. So this one's going to be 0, this one's going to be 1, this one's going to be 2, this one's going to be 3, and this one's going to be 4, and so on and so forth. You keep adding devices, you'll keep pegging this name on. And this FF, this allows you to do some configuration to your drive. So right here, I'm defining the interface to be an IBM PC, and I'm specifying that I'm also most likely going to be using DOS for my images. And for your computer, if you're not using an IBM 5150, you can configure this differently. Now we're going to get my DOS image, and we'll throw it onto this drive. We're going to use DOS 3.3 because it was the latest one I could get to load with just one floppy drive. So now if you take that image that's in the IBM PC dock, you drag it over, and we're just going to name it to be the 5th one in the series. So when we toggle the 5, this will be the image. Next, we're going to make a floppy drive image to put a rogue on, and to do that, you're going to need WinImage. This will allow you to create floppy drive images, and what's cool is you can make them in almost all varieties, but we're going to stick with 720 because it's the safest out of all the formats, at least it's very common. And what you can do now is you can inject files into the image. So we're going to put the exe, the data, and we're also going to put this weirder executable. It's for it's protective mode, and I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it's needed or else the application won't be able to run properly or at all. And then from here, you can just actually save the image, and what we'll do is we'll save it and we'll throw it onto the USB flash drive. And once you actually put it on the flash drive and you boot up your gotek, this is what it'll look like. It's going to say 00 because that's where you're starting, and you can use the right one to go up and the left one to go down. But when you see it 0_, that is where it's making the choice, and it's going to boot into that specific disk. So yep, it's booting into that disk. It's selected. Now that we've prepped the gotek, now it's time to actually get to interface with the actual IBM. So this is my IBM 5150, and this is the drive I'm trying to replace. Big 5¼ drive with this shoe guard connector on the back. So that's the first hurdle we have to take. We have to change the connectors from these shoe guards to something that's a shoe guard and an IDE connection, because that's the standard connection for the gotek. So they had these cables back in the day that had both ends. Now the problem I had with this is mine had this little blank spot in it, so I had to make some modifications to my gotek. So you can see here I chipped this little pin, and at least for the schematic, it shouldn't really matter because all these bottom pins are ground. So it's only just one little ground pin that's not going to get connected. The next thing you got to do is you have to put the jumpers. I put one on drive select 0 for S0, and you need this JC pin for IBM 51 computers. If your device has a twist in its wires like this, then you're gonna have to select it as S1. The last thing you got to worry about is your boot pin configuration. Specifically, you want to make sure that this is pulled down, and this is what boots the floppy drive on startup. So for an IBM 5150, which is an IBM PC, having that pin to 0 will boot it from the floppy drive. I'm gonna start to turn you on, and we preset it to 5. 5 was where the index that I put the file under. When you turn the device off and on again, it will hold the last position that you had, which is a nice handy feature. And you'll see right here, it's starting to go. The green light indicates that it's starting to read, and you'll see the numbers over here flashing on what sector it's currently on. So this will take a little bit, but it's loading up the DOS 3.3 image. Alright, and there we go, it's loaded. Just hit enter, and we're good. Now, since we've loaded it, now we can go to a different disk. So the Rogue I put on number 2. So here we'll switch, loading, and it's ready. So now when I do dir, we see the Rogue executable. So I type in Rogue. Oh, I try to type in Rogue. There we go. And you're off to the races. Get wrecked, goblins. I'll get wrecked, but